What's up everybody, Matt Moran here for another car review. This is of course the all-new 2022 Subaru WRX. So about the WRX, well, completely new here, brand new platform, brand new styling. It doesn't share a single panel with the Impreza anymore, so I mean totally different as far as all of the dimensions and everything about this. And I gotta say the styling is definitely polarizing, and styling is subjective, so I'm not going to dwell on the styling too much here, but I will say up front I actually think it looks very good. I love those C-shaped headlights there with the DRL there. They're smaller headlights, they're pushed out to the corners there and look really nice. Now this is a limited trim we're looking at here, so that DRL will also do your turn signals, but if you go for a lower version, the headlights look very similar, but that LED part won't do your turn signal, and so it's just a little bit of a difference there. But both headlights I think look really nice. The grille is now larger here. You have a nice large hood scoop here on the WRX, and it's nicely integrated with this hood, which really has these cool curvatures to it here and a lot more dimension to it than it did before. As far as the body cladding, that is the elephant in the room here that I wasn't crazy about when I first saw it. I will say that as time has gone on, the sting has worn away a little bit, and I think that especially in these darker colored vehicles like this World Rally Blue one, it doesn't stand out quite as much, so it's not quite so bad. Now up front there, you will see that you have a little bit of that material, but it's not as much as you have on the sides and the back. But the good news here about these new fenders is that first off, they're aluminum, so a little bit lighter now, but also you have an actual functional fender vent here, which is cool that you have that. And you also see this texture on this plastic. That is actually functional. That helps to reduce the turbulence with the airflow and gives the vehicle slightly better stability as a result. And then out back, still it's a lot. I mean, the entire rear bumper is that, rougher black plastic, and that's actually more black plastic than you get on a Subaru Crosstrek. A Subaru Crosstrek looks less rugged than this does in the back, in my opinion. So, I'm still not a huge fan of that rear bumper, but some nice parts there. You have nicely polished off exhaust tips there with the quad exhaust, and I love the taillights. They have that really cool detailing in them that they say was inspired by magma, and I actually think that's a really cool touch. You also here on premium and higher trims get a little lip spoiler there on top of the trunk lid, which is already kind of curved up to give you a spoiler already, and that also helps with airflow and all that. I just wish they'd put a little bit more body coloring there on the rear bumper. But otherwise, I think that overall the WRX I think is a really nice improvement. So the whole vehicle has grown nicely, and so it makes it a lot more muscular. So overall it's about 3 inches longer than the previous generation. You're on about a 1 inch longer wheelbase than before. The width has gone up by 1.2 inches for both the overall width and the track width, so that'll give you better stability on the corners, which I'll get to in a minute here. And they also actually managed to lower the roof line, so it's about 0.3 inches lower than the previous generation WRX, and that's something that even like that roof is not shared with an Impreza. It's all completely unique. Also, while we're up here at the roof, you'll see you still have mounting points here for a roof rack, which you can still put on, and that is one unique touch that this has that a lot of the competitors do not have. Also, one other thing, while we're talking about the whole rugged nature here of the WRX, they actually increased the ground clearance by ½ inch as well, so it actually is a little bit better potentially off the beaten path than the previous generation WRX. So maybe that justifies the extra cladding a little bit. I'm hoping that maybe the STI gets a little more body colored panels, but other than that, I've actually really warmed up to the WRX styling here, and I think that overall it's a really nice improvement in a lot of ways and is a really sharp looking car, especially in World Rally Blue. You gotta love it in World Rally Blue. Right, for the interior in the 2022 WRX, well, they made some really nice improvements in here. Obviously, the main dominating thing you can see is the 11.6 inch touchscreen here, but the rest of the interior, though, has had some nice improvements. So it's actually roomier in most ways than it has been in the past. And so first thing, sitting down in these seats, you have these new seats, which actually have larger bolsters than they did in the past, and they really focus on making them more comfortable as well. And here in this limited trim and the premium, you'll have heated seats. Now, these seats also, you can see, have these ultra suede material on them. There's no way to get leather anymore in any WRX. So this is the nicest seat you're going to get here, and you'll see the WRX stitched into the headrest there. If you go for a premium or a base trim, then you will still have the same seats, but they will only be cloth. Either way, though, these seats really hug me in nicely. We've already been doing a bunch of aggressive driving this morning, and they do a really good job of holding me in place and are totally comfortable. There are power adjustments here as well in the limited. Now, if you go for a GT trim of the WRX, which is automatic only, but if you're okay with that and you're willing to go to that absolute top trim, you do get Recaro seats seats in that, and there's still an ultra suede material on them, but they're going to have even bigger bolsters. Unfortunately though, that's still just only locked into that GT trim and only with that automatic. So if you want those cool seats, you'll either have to go for that, or hopefully those seats will also be available in the coming STI. Moving on to the steering wheel, it's a great, nice steering wheel. It has this like D shape to it now with the flat bottom and a little bit of a faux carbon fiber in the WRX thing here on it. Looked nice, but just a really great 9-3 grip. It's like a tiny bit lower than your average 9-3 grip and just gives you a really good grip on the wheel. Nice 10-2 notches, and just, you know, a few buttons here on it. This one, since it doesn't have the adaptive cruise, it has less than you would in an automatic equipped WRX, but it's still just a great wheel. Gauges are also good, simple gauges. It would be nice to see them go for something like a digital gauge cluster like you see in other competitors, but there's nothing wrong with these gauges. You know, nice, clear, simple, attractive looking fonts and stuff. In the middle there, you'll see a little display, and pretty typical to any other Subaru with the things that it will show you on there. But one cool touch is that it now has a boost gauge built right into the middle there, which is great because, you know, in the previous generation, having the boost gauge up over to the right in the middle of the dashboard wasn't ideal in my opinion. I really love having it there right, basically next to the tach, so it's right where you're going to be looking whenever you're doing performance driving. And then coming over to the center of the dashboard here, though, the 11.6-inch touchscreen is the main thing here, and that is on everything from premium and up. If you go for a base trim, you'll actually get two 7-inch screens. It's the same kind of setup as you'll see in any kind of base Outback or Legacy. They have the same thing. This system is okay. So I really love how it has volume and tune knobs and a few physical controls here for climate. So that's nice. The screen itself, it's a little slow sometimes. It's been a little bit buggy in the past Subarus that I've reviewed, but it does all the basics really well. It's, you know, easy to navigate. It's not too confusing or anything. So I really do like that about it. It does also have smartphone integration. So you have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it is still wired in. You don't have any kind of wireless smartphone integration like some of the competitors offer. But overall, I think this screen really achieves its purpose of really bringing the WRX into the next generation here and making it feel a little bit more modern in here. But otherwise, so you have a good amount of storage space here in the WRX with nice large pockets in the doors with a bottle holder. In the middle here, you have some USB jacks as well as a nice little bin and another power outlet and auxiliary jack as well. And then you'll see this other little extra like key holder kind of slot. You also have two cup holders. Great to still see a manual e-brake as well here. And then you also have the center armrest, which has a little bit of padding to it, but it's pretty hard under the padding. I wish that was a little bit softer. Anyway, you open that up and you'll see a good sized space there, and also you'll see another power outlet in there as well. But I gotta say that overall, all the materials in here feel, I think, a little bit nicer than the previous generation. You know, nice soft elbow points, some nice soft touch here even on the dash. You see the red stitching here, especially on the passenger side. And I like the little like metal looking trim you have here around the air vents. It's not actual metal, it's just plastic, but nice that you have some contrast there. One last little thing to mention is you have a Harman Kardon stereo upgrade, which is on the Limiteds. It's an option on the Premium as well though, so thankfully you don't have to go up to the Limited if you want to have a good sounding stereo. The base stereo might sound good as well, but I don't have a chance to test that today, but good to have that. Backseat space here in the WRX is also one of the benefits, I think, of having this slightly longer WRX for this new generation. So I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself, I have probably about 5 inches of legroom to spare back there. I mean, it is a good amount of space. Should be very good for, you know, if you want to install any kind of car seats, baby seats, that kind of stuff, should all fit back there very easily. And it's a pretty comfortable back seat as well, although it's worth noting that you actually have slightly less headroom in this generation as a result of that lower roof line than before. But still being 5'9", I still had, you know, maybe about 2 inches or so to spare there for my head. But if you're a taller person sitting in the back of a WRX, you know, just keep in mind this might be a little bit tighter. But, you know, you'll see that they have a full down center armrest here, but that's only in the Limited trim with the 2 cup holders built into it. You also will see when you look forward, there's 2 USB jacks there, and there's also pockets in those doors with another little bottle holder. And those seats do also fold flat, so it gives you extra practicality if you need a little bit more space than what the trunk offers. But moving on to the trunk here, that is another area where they did say that they increased the amount of space there in the trunk. Now, to my eyeballs, it looks a tiny bit smaller than the previous generation, but they say that it is bigger, and so maybe it's just a cutout or something. But you will also see beneath the floor there, there's also a couple little cutouts, but no huge bins or anything under there. But yes, overall, this interior is just a really nice place to be. But let's start up and go for a drive. The WRX here has the same Subaru key like any of the other Subarus have. Has some nice metal here on the sides of it though, and isn't too big. It's just a really nice key. I really like this key. So it is keyless access, keyless entry and push button start in premium and higher trims. If you go for a base trim, you still get a twist key and you just have, you know, the remote access, but you do not have the proximity key. But everything premium and up does have that. But you can see the very obvious cutout for where you would have the key go in. But anyway, push button start is really great here on these higher trims. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off here in the 2022 WRX. So the first things that I'm noticing here, well, you have excellent visibility, a huge windshield, hood drops down really nicely, nice than A-pillars, little window there, the door mirror, and so all very good as far as, you know, seeing out, very easy to drive, of course. But the other really big thing that jumped out at me right away is the gearing here. Nice and short gearing for the manual transmission, which is something that is getting more and more rare among manuals these days. With fuel economy stuff, everyone's going to have super tall gearing, and this is like insanely short, like so much so that I can like comfortably drive around in 5th gear at like 45 miles per hour and still have some low end grunt. Part of that is thanks to this bigger engine, which we'll get to in a minute here, but I'm just really impressed that I'm shifting a lot, and I like that. And as, you know, someone who loves driving a manual, if you're one of those types of people, you're going to love this. And considering 85% of WRX buyers go for the manual, so way to save the manuals, WRX buyers. But because it's such a large percentage, I think they really focus on this manual experience and making it be what manual lovers would want. And I'm really impressed with the ride quality. That's another thing, the refinement. I mean, this road is pretty rough with its pavement here, and still, you know, it's not making a racket with the road noise, and you know, it's very just comfortable. And so they said that, you know, a lot of this, they increased the torsional rigidity and the lateral stiffness and all that, and so that allowed them to actually go a little bit softer on the dampers, and so you have an improved ride quality while still having better handling. And so, you know, I'm just noticing it's been a couple of years admittedly since I've driven a WRX that wasn't an S209. That thing was a lot stiffer, obviously, but as far as regular WRXs, I feel like this is definitely a little bit more comfortable than before. Now, if you do want to go up to the GT version, you're willing to go for the automatic transmission, that will have adaptive dampers, which have even a comfort setting, so that may potentially be even more comfortable. Unfortunately, we're only going to be driving the manuals today, but so, you know, just for the standard suspension setup here, though, it's just really nice. They also did a bunch of other advanced little changes behind the scenes to the suspension as well to give it better handling. For example, we have a rear sway bar that's now mounted directly to the body. That's one of the things from the Subaru Global platform, which the WRX is now on for the first time ever. And so even so, some of these little bumps we're going over here, it soaks up really nicely, nice and flat handling. And it's also exaggerated by this steering, which the steering is definitely lighter feeling than the previous generation, in my opinion. And so that means that it really gives you this eager feeling that wants to dive into corners, and you have a good amount of grip too with these tires, so that really helps as well. So we're driving a limited model currently, and so this limited has 245 wide summer tires on it here, and if you were to go for a base trim, they're 235s, but everything other than the base trim goes up to 245 wide summer tires. All trims have summer tires, by the way, so if you are in an area that gets weather, you're going to want to budget in some money there for all season or snow tires. And I also really like with this manual that the flywheel is fairly light, so it means that it's pretty easy to rev match your downshifts. I'll play around with that more here as we're driving more during the day. And I'm not going to go full attack yet because I'm saving my first acceleration reaction for actually starting from a stop. But I mean, this motor really has a good amount of punch, and these corners, we're up in the mountains here, and it is phenomenal, these corners. This really allows me to get a great first impression here of the handling, and it is just very stable, very confidence inspiring. Of course, we still have the signature Subaru symmetrical all-wheel drive system, and here in the manual it's still the traditional viscous coupling unit, and so it has a 50-50 split, but that of course can change depending on the scenario. And so I mean, obviously that means that you're going to have plenty of grip, no issues whatsoever with any kind of traction here, and it just feels great, especially, you know, having a turbo motor up here in higher elevations and whatnot. You know, that's really one of the big perks of the turbos. You're always going to have good punch, never feels like it's running out of steam or anything, and pulls really nicely. So yeah, we have this 2.4 liter turbocharged boxer engine here, and it does have a few unique touches. So even though it's the same displacement as what you get in like an Outback XT or an Ascent or something like that, they do have unique valve springs here. So they say that this this version of this engine will actually be more durable at higher RPMs, because they know obviously that you're going to be in the higher RPMs much more than an Ascent owner would be. So they've beefed that up to take that abuse. There's also a few different things with the turbo that they've tweaked as well, so that it's quicker response. You also have a broader power curve here. And so I am definitely noticing that compared to the previous generation, this is less peaky. You know, I really enjoyed the peakiness. That's honestly kind of been like a signature WRX trait. And this, I mean, we'll have to, again, do an acceleration from a stop to really see, but at least once you're up here in the higher RPMs, just attacking a back road like this, it really, there's no drop off. There's just, you have nice meaty power. It still does make peak power at 5,800 RPMs, so you're still going to have to wring it out if you want the absolute most out of it. But you know, there's just way more power in the lower RPMs now than before. And so that's what you're really going to feel at the seat of your pants, is that you're going to have that extra pickup whenever you're, you know, just in normal daily driving scenarios and you're not doing a full-on drag strip launch. And so, you know, I think that as far as how people actually use and experience these vehicles, this will be a noticeable improvement with this engine, even though the power isn't really much improved and torque is actually identical to the old motor, even though you have the additional displacement. So I'm not sure, you know, why they didn't turn it up just a little bit more, but, you know, at least you do have 271 horsepower, so that is more than before, 258 pound-feet of torque still, and they didn't actually quote a 0 to 60 time either, so I'm not going to be able to say exactly how much faster this is, but they did show us a graph showing that you do have a much stronger acceleration, especially under 45 miles per hour than you had in the past. So, you know, hopefully that will make this a good bit quicker whenever you actually do a 0 to 60 test. But yeah, just, I love driving this thing around corners. It's fantastic, and I would say it actually is a good bit less body roll than what you get with the previous generation as well. I actually didn't love the handling in the previous generation WRX in its normal configuration before they added on the performance package and stuff like that. Just the standard WRX, I thought it was like, okay, this definitely needs like bigger sway bars and stuff, and you know, wasn't how I would have liked it to be out of the factory. This, I think, is ready to go right out of the factory. I think it has really flat handling, feels much better, is a huge improvement. But as we're going down some downhill sections here, one thing I do wish was a little bit more aggressive, I think, was the braking response. So there's a lot of brake travel, and even once you do start getting some braking action out of it, it's fairly dead. It's kind of a numb brake feel, and I don't really feel much bite action happening, and it's kind of just me just putting a lot of pressure on the brake and just like hoping that it does you know, the braking that I'm wanting it to do. But it's not as grabby, and it's not as confidence inspiring as I would like the brakes to be. Obviously that's something you could probably change. You can always swap pads and things like that, but just from a booster standpoint, I wish that this was a little bit more aggressively boosted. Obviously, whenever you go up, if there will be some type of Brembo package possibly down the road, like they introduced on the previous generation, that could certainly help. So maybe this is just kind of giving some headroom for that to be added on later, or obviously for the STI version that is inevitably coming at some point, that will of course probably address this. But that is really the only shortcoming. I mean, they still work fine, it's just that they just don't give me as much confidence as I would like. But honestly, you really don't have to use the brakes very much, even whenever you are you know, doing some good speeds around these corners, because it just grips and just keeps on gripping. Again, even on this damp road, it's doing a really good job. Having the wider track certainly helps. You know, you're over an inch wider for the track and the width overall, and so all that's going to give you that more stable handling as well. But I feel like this really goes back to one of the signature things for the WRX, is that it's just so good with its handling, and it's just a joy to go around corners in. I remember one of the original marketing things for the 2002 WRX, which now is exactly 20 years ago that car was debuted. One of the advertisements said it puts corners in a headlock and gives them a noogie, and that's kind of I feel like it still has that same kind of character to it. And I think part of that also helps that they actually kept the weight really low in this. So you're still, for a base model, under 3,300 pounds, like 3,297. and that's actually only about 3 pounds heavier than the old base. And when you go to a premium trim, you actually have lost 31 pounds over the previous generation. And then I think limited, you've gained about 17 pounds. But I mean, very minimal additions there. Now, it is worth noting, though, if you go for an automatic WRX, you're going to have a pretty significant weight penalty because it adds in the eyesight, the extra eyesight tech. And so overall, you gain about 140 pounds, give or take a few. I was expecting them to gain weight with this vehicle, and the fact that they didn't, even though it's bigger, even though it has more tech and all these improvements, a bigger engine, the fact that they kept the weight the same and even slightly less for the premium is actually kind of mind-blowing in my opinion, personally. It's just very, very commendable of the Subaru engineers to be able to maximize this. But I mean, this corner just like keeps going and going and going, and it just, even with this damp road, it's just gripping so well. And yeah, this it's putting a smile on my face. This thing is fantastic. Say what you want about the styling of the new WRX, but around corners, this thing definitely makes me giddy. It is fantastic. I'm having a blast here. Also, the VDC system here for the WRX now has a new track mode. So previously there was just on and off, and thankfully the off setting actually does turn everything off completely if you want. But now you have a track mode, which will give you a little bit more leeway, and so that's just nice if you do really want to push it. But like, there was a really tight little hairpin there that I really tried to push the all-wheel drive system, and the light lit up for a split second. I'm still just in the normal mode, but it still felt very neutral. Now, it didn't, want to do any kind of oversteering or anything like that, but they did say that this vehicle will rotate a little bit better because of some of the suspension improvements that they made. But yeah, I'm also impressed though. Like, this road right now is really bumpy, and it still isn't upsetting the chassis. I'm still having, just a really composed, controlled ride here, and it's not upsetting the vehicle. I'm still able to have the same confident handling. So the dampers now have a rebound spring in addition to the extra suspension travel you actually get here with the new WRX as well. And so those two things really help you on a road, especially like this one, where imperfect pavement, a bunch of divots and stuff, doesn't upset it as much as you would get, with the previous generation, where it'd probably be a little bit more upset. And so it's really just feeling like it'll just tackle anything I throw at it. One last thing I have to mention about the handling is that they actually increased ground clearance by ½ an inch as well with the new WRX. So even with extra ground clearance, you still have this fantastic handling improvement. I'm just very impressed with, again, all the efforts they made here with the new WRX. But I just turned onto the straight road here, and let's see how the WRX accelerates. Here we go. So it gets up and goes pretty well. I mean, the gearing is nice and short, that I'm, already halfway through third gear here just to get up to 60 miles per hour. But yeah, it's a good amount of punch. They haven't quoted a 0 to 60 time, so I can't say how this compares. But they did say, again, you have that broader torque curve than what you had previously. So hopefully it'll be a little bit quicker. It feels a good bit punchy. I mean, I think, again, based on a few years back driving a WRX, I mean, I'd say this feels roughly the same, though, from a seat of the pants type of impression. And it's quick, but it's not quite as exciting with its power delivery as something like the Hyundai Elantra N, for example. That, obviously, being front-wheel drive, it's going to have more drama with the wheel spin, but just the way that motor builds power, it's a lot more exciting. You also have a higher redline in those. The redline here in this is like 6,000 RPMs, which is like almost like diesel low. It's not quite that bad, but I mean, I really wish, because they actually lower the redline compared to last year's engine, and I wish that there's a little more room there to rev it out a little bit. But it feels good. I wish there was a little more excitement. I also wish there was more exhaust noise. There's very little. I mean, you get a little bit of the boxer rumble there, but honestly, this engine is loudest whenever you start it up and you're just sitting here idling. It's like really drony at idle. It's almost like aftermarket exhaust loud drone when you first start it up on the inside here, at least with that. But then once it settles down to a normal idle level, then it's a good bit quieter. But so that's just another thing that, again, some of the competitors, now the GTI and Golf R and stuff aren't going to be super loud either, but that's just one area. If you don't have to have all-wheel drive, I think the Elantra N, with the crackles and the pops and all the drama, plus its front-wheel drive drama and stuff, that just made me giggle a lot more. It's a lot more exciting than this is. But, the all-wheel drive traction and the certainty of this is certainly going to be really, really nice to have. I'm excited for the STI. I'm hoping that they kind of up the ante a little bit more with the power, because I would have liked to see more horsepower here in this for this new version. Hopefully the STI is the one that really does a nice big leap in power. And it's also worth noting that yes, they didn't increase the power by very much, but they already were starting from a position of strength, and outside of the Elantra N, all the other challengers are way less powerful. You have the GTI, which is like 241 horsepower or something, way less than this. I mean, that has a good bit of torque, but still, this is still starting out way higher than all the others. And you look at Civic SIs and stuff like that, which will probably come in a little bit cheaper than this, but only by a couple grand. And with those, you're still sitting at 200 horsepower. So I can't really complain too much about 271 horsepower in something that will most likely be around the $30,000 mark. And that is one thing to mention, is we don't have any pricing, unfortunately, yet here for the WRX. They're not actually going to be going on sale until like early spring of next year. I think production starts in January sometime, and then they'll start showing up a little bit after that. But so I can't say exactly how this is going to fit in pricing wise, but Subaru did mention that they don't usually do large price hikes, so you shouldn't expect any kind of insane price change compared to last year, which means hopefully this will start either just at or maybe even slightly under 30,000, or at least be in that neighborhood, which then would also undercut an Elantra N, for example. You get a little bit less toys in this than you do in that. There's a lot of cool features and modes and stuff that has that this doesn't, but if they actually do that, then this is a really good value proposition. And regardless, anywhere in the $30,000 range, you're still going to come in, 10 grand less than a Golf R, which is the only other all-wheel drive option in this kind of segment. Everyone else has kind of abandoned the all-wheel drive thing. So if you must have all-wheel drive, these days it's this or a Golf R, that's it. So, they almost have a monopoly on $30,000 all-wheel drive performance cars here. We'll see what happens next year with the GR Corolla that's coming and stuff like that. But in the meantime, I mean, Subaru's kind of got this whole segment to themselves in a way. And so I'm just glad that they made as many improvements as they did, because they honestly didn't need to. And they even said that just even last year, WRX sales were still increasing for the end of its generation with the previous generation, which is the exact opposite of what you usually get. And some of that might be pandemic related and stuff, but even still, I think that the WRX continues to really resonate with people. It's still very desirable. I do have to say one last complaint, though, that I really wish those adaptive dampers were available in a manual transmission WRX. It's an all-year, all-around car for any kind of situation, honestly. And so to not have that comfort aspect that is available, that's on the part shelf now, and not have it offered is just a little bit unfortunate, because I'm assuming it'll be really nice to have that extra comfort. The last little thing to mention is the fuel economy here in the WRX. So predictably, because this engine is a little bit larger now, fuel economy has dropped by 1 mpg compared to the old 2-liter in basically all the metrics. So they'll do 19 mpg in the city, 26 on the highway, and 22 combined. And so, I still think for an all-wheel drive vehicle, it's as powerful as this is. That's fine. I don't think WRX owners really care too much about fuel economy, so I'm not going to harp on it. One other little thing I briefly want to mention, which I know a lot of WRX owners probably do not care about, is safety tech. So it's just worth noting that I'm in this limited trim, and you get blind spot monitoring in that, but any other trim that's lower does not get blind spot monitoring. So that is one nice feature, and I kind of wish that was brought down to at least the premium, but it's only here on the limited. You also get no adaptive cruise control. That's only in the automatic versions that get that advanced eyesight system. This just has automatic emergency braking, and that's about it. So, a little bit less safety tech, but again, this is a driver's car. I don't think anyone's going to really complain. We just wanted to mention that. But yeah, overall, the WRX is still fantastic, even if I wish it was a little bit louder and a little more character-filled with the engine. Those are really my only nitpicks, because otherwise this thing is so much fun to drive, so rewarding on a back road. Having that all-weather traction is so awesome, and I just think it's a really great package, and again, I'm sure the value is going to be super, super good, like it always has been as well. And so yeah, that's about all of my thoughts here on the WRX. But let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Subaru for this opportunity to review the WRX. And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.